Well, the aughts practiced, what are they? As
So
a
he's gonna go through now a list of these various odds, right? And the first one is practices,
Yeah.
right?
So as
Okay.
the first step in the naming of the human telos, virtue ethicists, including Christian virtue ethicists, examine arenas in which the telos rises close to the surface, as we saw earlier in friendship. One such arena is practice, and here he defines practice as any social enterprise through which novices are progressively trained by experts to acquire skills by means of which they can both excel and grow to appreciate the goods that all insiders recognize. Okay, so it's the baby human of some variety, whether it's a skill or age or wanting to learn something, and they're progressively trained, so it's a step process by experts. So it could be book formation, videos, a teacher coming alongside them, a parent, to acquire skills, again, by means by which they can both excel and grow to appreciate the good that all insiders recognize. So they will then become like the experts. So maybe the model there is um, focused on uh, the person and uh, the new person coming into it becoming more like the other people in that field or skill set or whatever what we may be talking about. So he says examples of formative practices include medicine, right? You get your doctorate, you learn all the Latin words, and then what do? Well, then you immediately start operating on somebody. No, 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 no. You go, you do an internship, you start practicing alongside other people who can slap your hand before you pick up the scalpel. When it's like, no, this person just needs the stethoscope to see if he has a heartbeat. Engineering, right? So if you're creating buildings that shouldn't fall down, see how welding works, or coming alongside of someone who knows the best way to improve a truss to sturdy the building. Carpentry, same thing. There's even apprenticeships there. Music, what do? We go and we learn from other people to teach us not so much this is the A key, this is the B key, this is how to flutter your fingers, but how does it sound and how to more model like that person. And there are other various examples there, but he gives us things like medicine, engineering, carpeting, music here.
So the novice then is progressively trained by experts, right,
Mm-hmm.
to reach a particular end or goal. He says at the level of the individual, the human telos with respect to practice is simply to excel at the practices. That description remains equally vague since, as we know, understanding of the standards of excellence within a practice can be only as deep as the novice has progressed in the respective training regime. Right.
Yeah.
So it's vague because we have to grow into it as we continue to practice and then we understand it more and more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if you're learning from the expert in, infant brain surgery, what is that person doing? That person is always learning more and developing new techniques to be what? Better, to do things different. So, what's the end point? To preserve all life from all eternity through infant brain surgery? Well, no, and so that the end goal doesn't seem clear because even our experts are still in the process of learning the skill. So it's a nice little conundrum here that I think he does well of pointing out. Well, how about the second arena in which telos comes to the close to the surface? It's by tradition. By tradition, he means, to borrow Alastair McIntyre's notion of a group of people who exist across time and are identified by their ongoing, sometimes explicit, sometimes implicit. So whether like this is uh, group people A or, oh, I see people like me that are in this area that are like this. And they discuss about what the good is. And so you can think of oh boy, you'd probably think of uh, journeymen of a particular trade, and so you point back to or firefighters. I saw an interesting documentary of following New York City Fire Department and talking about oh, our father, he didn't have a rebreather, and he would go through the smoke inhaled room and just call out what he needed. And they said that was crazy, and the formation of that. So this tradition of we're in the mode like this person, but we've also improved in certain areas, but we can still identify with this person who wears the same hat that we do. But it could also be not so much like a uniform, but just people that we can identify with in certain areas. And they could be, I too am like this poet and this author and this engineer. So they could be completely different as far as skill level in trade, but maybe in thinking process they're similar, is what he's talking about.
And he references here Alistair McIntyre as
Thank
a
you.
as an important, because of, he's written an extremely important book with regard to virtue ethics, and so he's working off McIntyre's work here.
Okay. Good, Paul. Good. I will try and remember McIntyre. Well, good, because I have to say that here. We might say that the Christian tradition, in McIntyre's sense. So, look, I learned from an expert in the field of how to say McIntyre, is about a particular pattern of communal living. So, this is the Christian tradition. Communal living, one denominated by the practices of witnessing, worship, works of mercy, and you don't get another W, but discipleship and spirit directed discernment, as well as the distinctive manner of executing all practices, for example, charity hospitals. So, universities, Christian universities, were formed in the Christian tradition. The science exploration was formed in the Christian tradition. Now, a lot of those things, including even hospitals, have taken off their Methodist, Catholic, Baptist names for the purposes of appealing to modern audiences, but the tradition still holds even with them. So witnesses, the practice of witness, worship, works of mercy, discipleship, and spirit dedicated discernment.
Okay, so he's working our way through these arts, and we've seen now the arts of practice and the arts of tradition. Finally, he gets here to the arts of narrative. He says the third arena, just as nuanced and involved as practice and tradition, is narrative. Parents use narrative or story, right, to raise their children. He tells us to think of Honest Abe or the Good Samaritan and so on, because human beings live in story-shaped lives. Wow, so my life is story-shaped. Go figure, right? And it's only by means of stories that children learn how to tell what fits and what doesn't fit. This claim, he says, is a mouthful, but what he means to say is that ethics can't do without stories. So we need stories, right? Stories or narratives Christians cling to are not all of equal weight. We learn to consider some texts canonical insofar as these are the yardsticks we live by. The tellus of human living, he tells us, according to the narrative slice of virtue ethics, then, is to live faithfully to the right stories. Yeah. So there it is, the tellus, or the goal or the purpose of human living. And according to this narrative portion here of virtue ethics, it's to live faithfully to the right stories.
Yeah. And there's kind of two stories, right? There's the comedies, the things that succeed, and the tragedies. You can also learn from the tragedies. I think about the ways police training is done. What happens? Well, it's not just, the law says this. If you encounter point A, do thing B. You count point B, do thing C. No, what happens is you have a bunch of cops in a room and they either share stories or watch videos of people doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Usually it's the wrong thing, because then you can point out what should have happened and you can make good quality changes in the general operating procedures that can come from, the worst things. And so even there, the story is done to tell things. You learn from stories. Tell me a story about, back in the day when this happened. And so you glob on what you can from that story, and the expert, the person who was there before, who has some knowledge of right and wrong of that situation, because they're at that point telling you it, comes about through that sharing of story. And
Right. So there we have the ought, right? He tells
right,
us what we ought to do and what we ought not to do through
right,
that story.
right.
Yeah.